I spent 57 years being careful. I raised 2 kids, worked 33 years at the same insurance company, never missed a mortgage payment. I was the responsible one, the safe one, the one who always said no to adventures because someone had to keep things running. But when I retired last spring and my youngest moved to Seattle, I looked around my empty house in Ohio and realized I had never done anything just for myself, never traveled alone. Never proved I could exist outside of being someone's mother or someone's employee. So I booked a flight to Montreal. 10 days. Solo. My daughter thought I was brave. My son thought I was crazy. I just wanted to feel like I mattered on my own terms. I imagined walking through old streets, drinking coffee in small cafes, taking photos no one else cared about. I imagined freedom. What I didn't imagine was the man in the gray jacket, the one who would follow me for 6 hours straight, the one whose footsteps I can still hear when I close my eyes. I arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in early October. The air smelled like rain and roasted chestnuts. I checked into a small hotel near Old Montreal, dropped my suitcase on the bed, and walked out with nothing but my phone and a small crossbody purse. The city felt alive in a way Cleveland never did. People spoke French around me, fast and musical. I didn't understand most of it, but I didn't care. I wandered past stone buildings and narrow alleyways, stopped to look at art in gallery windows, bought a pastry from a bakery where the woman behind the counter smiled, even though I butchered the pronunciation. For 3 hours, I felt light, invisible in the best way. Just another tourist. Just another woman enjoying her day. I thought about texting my kids to tell them I was fine, better than fine, but I didn't. I wanted to keep this feeling to myself a little longer. I wanted to prove I could handle being alone. That's when I saw him for the first time, standing across the street, watching. I didn't think much of it then. A man in his 40s, maybe. Average height, gray jacket, jeans, dark baseball cap. He was leaning against a lamppost, looking down at his phone. Plenty of people do that. I kept walking. But 20 minutes later, when I came out of a bookstore, he was there again. Same jacket, same posture. This time closer. Maybe 15 feet behind me. I told myself it was a coincidence. Montreal isn't that big. Tourists overlap. But my stomach tightened anyway. I turned down a side street I hadn't planned on taking, just to test it, just to see. And when I glanced back at the reflection in a cafe window, I saw him turn too. That's when I knew. That's when everything changed. Because I wasn't invisible anymore. I was being followed. And I had no idea why. Before we continue, please comment below with the city you're watching from. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like. My name is Linda Harris. I'm 57 years old. I live in a 3-bedroom house in Shaker Heights, Ohio. That's been too quiet for 2 years now. My husband left when I was 43. The kids were still young then, so I stayed busy. I worked full-time as a claims adjuster, drove carpool, made dinners, signed permission slips, attended parent-teacher conferences. I didn't have time to fall apart. I didn't have time to think about what I wanted. I just kept moving. My daughter Emma graduated college in 2019. My son Michael finished in 2022. They both got jobs in other states. They call on Sundays. They visit on holidays. But the house stays empty. And I realized one morning, standing in my kitchen with coffee I didn't really want, that I had spent 3 decades being useful to everyone except myself. I had never traveled alone. Never eaten dinner at a restaurant by myself, never made a decision based purely on what I wanted to do. So when I retired in May, I made myself a promise. I would take one trip, just me, somewhere I had never been, somewhere that scared me a little. I chose Montreal because it wasn't too far but felt foreign enough to count. I spent 2 months planning. I read travel blogs, watched YouTube videos, learned 10 phrases in French I immediately forgot how to pronounce. My daughter thought it was wonderful. She sent me links to hotels and restaurants. My son was worried. He asked if I had travel insurance, if I knew how to use international data, if I was sure I wanted to go alone. I told him I was sure. But I wasn't. Not completely. The night before my flight, I sat on my couch with my packed suitcase and wondered if I was making a mistake. 57 felt too old to suddenly become adventurous. I thought about canceling. I thought about telling my kids I changed my mind, but I didn't, because I knew if I didn't do this now, I never would. I would spend the rest of my life in that quiet house, waiting for phone calls, wondering what I could have been if I had ever been brave enough to try. The flight was short, less than 2 hours. I sat in a window seat and watched Ohio disappear beneath clouds. I felt nervous and excited in equal measure. When we landed, I took my time getting off the plane. I walked through customs with my passport clutched too tightly in my hand. I answered the officer's questions about the purpose of my visit. "Tourism," I said. "Just tourism." He stamped my passport and waved me through. I took a taxi to the hotel. The driver didn't speak much English and I didn't speak much French, so we rode in silence. I watched the city pass outside my window. Old churches, cobblestone streets, cafes with outdoor seating even though it was cool outside. It looked exactly like the photos I had studied for weeks. But being there in person felt different. It felt real. It felt like I was actually doing something that mattered. The hotel was small, 3 stories, red brick, a sign in French and English above the door. My room was on the 2nd floor. It had a double bed with a floral comforter, a wooden desk, a chair by the window. The bathroom was tiny but clean. I unpacked slowly. I hung my jackets in the closet. I lined up my toiletries on the counter. I plugged in my phone charger. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked around. This was mine. Just mine. No one else's opinion mattered. No one else's schedule to follow. I could do anything I wanted. The thought was thrilling and terrifying at the same time. I changed into comfortable walking shoes, grabbed my purse, and left before I could talk myself out of it. The neighborhood was beautiful. Narrow streets lined with old buildings, flower boxes and windows, people sitting at cafe tables speaking rapid French. I walked slowly, taking everything in. I stopped to look at menus posted outside restaurants. I peered into shop windows filled with handmade soaps and vintage clothing and books I couldn't read. I felt like a kid exploring a new playground. Everything seemed interesting. Everything seemed worth noticing. I bought a chocolate croissant from a bakery and ate it while standing on the sidewalk. It was buttery and sweet and perfect. I took a photo of the empty pastry bag just to remember the moment. I felt proud of myself. Proud that I was here. Proud that I hadn't let fear win. I walked for hours without a real destination. I crossed streets when the light changed. I followed groups of tourists when they looked like they knew where they were going. I sat on a bench in a small park and watched pigeons fight over crumbs. An older man sat next to me and said something in French. I smiled and shrugged. He laughed and switched to English. "Beautiful day," he said. I agreed. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Then he stood and walked away. It was a simple interaction, meaningless really. But it made me feel normal, like I belonged there, like I wasn't just a scared woman pretending to be confident. By late afternoon, my feet started to hurt. I found a cafe with outdoor seating and ordered a coffee. The waiter spoke perfect English and didn't make me feel stupid for not knowing French. I sat at a small table and watched people walk by. Couples holding hands, families with strollers, groups of friends laughing. I felt a pang of loneliness. Not the heavy kind. Just the kind that reminds you that you're alone. I thought about calling Emma, telling her I made it, telling her the city was beautiful and I was doing fine. But I didn't. I wanted to sit with the feeling a little longer. I wanted to prove to myself that I could be alone without needing someone to validate it. I paid for my coffee and started walking back toward the hotel. I didn't rush. I stopped to look at street art painted on the side of a building. I read a plaque about the history of the neighborhood. I watched a musician play violin on a corner while people dropped coins into his open case. I felt calm, settled, like I had made the right choice. Like this trip was exactly what I needed. That's when I first noticed him. The man in the gray jacket. He was standing across the street, leaning against a lamppost looking down at his phone. I didn't think anything of it. People stand on street corners all the time. People look at their phones. It wasn't unusual. But something made me glance at him twice. Maybe it was the way he stood so still. Maybe it was the way he didn't seem to be waiting for anyone. I don't know. I kept walking. I turned onto a quieter street. Fewer people. Fewer shops. Just residential buildings with wrought iron balconies and potted plants. I liked the peacefulness of it. I slowed down to enjoy it. I stopped to take a photo of a door painted bright blue. I checked the time on my phone. Almost 5. I thought about heading back to the hotel to rest before dinner. But I wasn't tired. I felt energized. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. I decided to walk a little longer. Just one more street. Just a little more exploring. I turned left at the next corner and walked past a small grocery store. The smell of fresh bread drifted out through the open door. I almost went inside, but I didn't. I kept walking. That's when I saw him again. The man in the gray jacket. He was maybe 20 feet behind me. Same jacket, same cap, same posture. I stopped. He stopped. I told myself it was nothing. Montreal isn't a huge city. Tourists take the same routes. It's normal to see the same people more than once. But my heart beat a little faster anyway. I crossed the street. He didn't. I felt silly for even noticing. I kept walking. I turned right at the next block, heading back toward the main area where my hotel was. I glanced behind me. He wasn't there. I exhaled. See? I told myself. Nothing. You're being paranoid. You're not used to being alone in a strange city. That's all this is. I stopped at a bookstore. A small one with creaky wooden floors and shelves packed so tightly you had to turn sideways to walk between them. I browsed for 15 minutes. I picked up a book with an interesting cover, flipped through it even though it was in French, put it back. I bought a postcard with a picture of old Montreal on it. I thought I might send it to my kids. Or maybe just keep it. I left the bookstore and stood on the sidewalk, trying to decide which direction to go. That's when I saw him again. Same man, same jacket. He was across the street, half hidden behind a group of people waiting at a crosswalk. But I saw him. And this time, when I looked directly at him, he looked away. Not quickly. Not obviously, but enough. Enough that I knew. He wasn't just a random tourist. He was watching me, and I didn't know why. I started walking faster, not running. I didn't want to seem crazy, but my steps were quicker, purposeful. I turned down a street I didn't recognize. I glanced back. He was following. Not close, maybe 30 feet behind, but definitely following. My hands started to shake. I gripped my purse strap tighter. I told myself to stay calm, to think logically. Maybe he was just going in the same direction. Maybe I was imagining things. But I wasn't. Deep down, I knew I wasn't. I could feel his eyes on me. I could feel the weight of his attention. I kept walking. Faster now. I looked for a crowded place to duck into. A restaurant. A store. Anywhere with people. But this street was quieter. Residential. No shops. Just apartments and parked cars and narrow sidewalks. I turned another corner. My breathing was shallow. My chest felt tight. I looked back again. He was still there. Same distance. Same pace. Like he knew exactly how far to stay to avoid being obvious. I thought about confronting him, turning around and asking what he wanted. But I was too scared. What if he had a weapon? What if he grabbed me? What if no one helped? I was 57 years old. I wasn't strong. I wasn't fast. I was just a woman alone in a city where I didn't speak the language. I felt stupid for coming here. Stupid for thinking I could handle this. I wanted to call someone. But who? My kids were thousands of miles away. The police? And say what? A man is walking behind me? They would think I was paranoid. They would think I was overreacting. I saw a cafe up ahead. The windows were bright. I could see people inside. I walked toward it. I pulled open the door and stepped inside. The warmth hit me immediately. The smell of coffee and baked goods. I stood near the entrance, pretending to look at the menu on the wall. I glanced out the window. He was across the street, standing, waiting, not looking at me directly, but not leaving either. My stomach turned. I ordered a tea I didn't want. I sat at a table near the back where I could see the door. I pulled out my phone and pretended to scroll. My hands were still shaking. I stayed there for 30 minutes. I watched the door. I watched the street. He didn't come in. But he didn't leave either. He just stood there, patient, calm, like he had all the time in the world. When I finally left, he was gone. I scanned the street in both directions. Nothing. I felt a rush of relief. Maybe I had been wrong. Maybe it was just coincidence. Maybe he had been waiting for someone and they finally showed up. I started walking toward the hotel. My legs felt weak. My head hurt. I just wanted to get back to my room, to lock the door, to feel safe. I walked quickly, checking over my shoulder every few steps. The streets were busier now. People were heading home from work. I felt safer in the crowd. I turned onto the street where my hotel was, just 2 more blocks. I could see the red brick building up ahead. I was almost there. And then I saw him again. Standing at the corner. Same jacket, same cap, looking right at me. And this time, he smiled. I froze. My feet stopped moving before my brain caught up. He was standing at the corner, hands in his pockets, head tilted slightly like he was studying me. The smile wasn't friendly. It wasn't warm. It was knowing. Like he wanted me to see him. Like he wanted me to understand that this wasn't random. My heart slammed against my ribs. I forced myself to keep walking. I couldn't stop in the middle of the sidewalk. I couldn't let him see how scared I was. I lowered my eyes and walked past him, keeping as much distance as possible. I didn't look at him directly, but I felt him. I felt his presence like a cold weight pressing against my back. I kept my pace steady. Normal, like nothing was wrong. Like I hadn't just seen the same man in 5 different locations over 3 hours. I reached my hotel and pushed through the front door. The lobby was small. A desk on the left, a narrow staircase on the right. A young man stood behind the desk, typing on a computer. I wanted to say something. I wanted to tell him a man had followed me. But what would I say? I didn't have proof. I didn't have photos. I just had a feeling. A terrible sinking feeling that something was very wrong. I walked past the desk and climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor. My hands fumbled with the key card. It took 3 tries to get the door open. I stepped inside and locked it immediately. I slid the chain across. I checked the windows. They were locked. I pulled the curtains closed. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to breathe. My phone was in my hand. I thought about calling Emma. But what would I say? That I thought someone followed me? She would panic. She would tell me to come home. And maybe that's what I should do. Maybe I should pack my bag and book the next flight back to Cleveland. But I didn't want to. I didn't want to give up. I had come here to prove something to myself. I had come here to be brave. Running away on the first day felt like failure. I told myself I was overreacting, that I was letting fear control me, that maybe the man wasn't following me at all. Maybe he just happened to be going in the same direction. Maybe I was seeing patterns that weren't there because I was alone and nervous and not used to traveling. I took a shower. Hot water. As hot as I could stand. I stood under the stream and tried to wash away the anxiety. I told myself I would feel better after I rested. After I ate something, I dried off and put on clean clothes, jeans, a sweater. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. I looked tired, older than 57. The lines around my eyes seemed deeper. I thought about my ex-husband, about how he used to tell me I worried too much, about how he used to say I invented problems that didn't exist. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was doing that now. Maybe I was turning a coincidence into a crisis because I was scared of being alone. I ordered room service, a sandwich and fries. I wasn't hungry, but I knew I needed to eat. The food arrived 20 minutes later. A teenager in a hotel uniform knocked and left the tray outside my door. I waited until I heard his footsteps fade down the hallway before I opened the door and grabbed it. I ate at the small desk by the window. The sandwich was dry. The fries were cold. But I finished most of it. I felt a little better with food in my stomach, a little more grounded. I checked my phone. A text from Emma asking how the trip was going. I typed out a reply. Great. The city is beautiful. Having a wonderful time. I hesitated before sending it. It wasn't true. But I didn't want to worry her. I hit send. I tried to sleep. I turned off the lights and climbed into bed. But my mind wouldn't stop. I kept replaying the day. The man at the lamppost. The man outside the bookstore. The man at the corner. The smile. That knowing, terrible smile. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I was safe. But I didn't believe it. I got up and checked the door again. Still locked. Chains still in place. I looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. I went back to bed. I lay there staring at the ceiling. Every sound made me jump. Footsteps in the hallway. A door closing somewhere down the hall. The hum of the heater kicking on. I didn't fall asleep until after 2 a.m. And when I did, I dreamed about gray jackets and footsteps that matched mine too perfectly. I woke up at 8. My body ached like I hadn't slept at all. I showered again, got dressed, checked my phone. Nothing important. I thought about staying in the room all day, ordering food, watching TV, hiding, but I couldn't. I had paid for this trip. I had planned it for months. I couldn't let one strange man ruin it. I told myself yesterday was a fluke, that today would be different, that I wouldn't see him again. I grabbed my purse and left the room. I walked downstairs. The same young man was at the desk. He smiled and asked if I needed anything. I said no. I walked outside. The morning was cool. The sky was gray and heavy with clouds. I walked in the opposite direction from yesterday. I wanted to see a different part of the city. I wanted new streets. New faces. I stopped at a cafe and ordered coffee and a croissant. I sat inside this time, near the window. I watched people walk by. Businessmen in suits, women pushing strollers, students with backpacks, normal people doing normal things. I felt myself relax a little. See? I thought. Everything is fine. You're fine. I finished my coffee and left. I walked toward the waterfront. I had read about it in my travel research. A boardwalk with views of the river, benches and sculptures and street performers. It sounded peaceful. I followed the signs. The streets got wider, more open, fewer buildings, more sky. I started to feel better. The tightness in my chest eased. I passed a group of tourists taking photos in front of a fountain. A man playing guitar on a corner. A woman selling paintings from a folding table. It all felt normal. Safe. I reached the waterfront and stood looking out at the water. It was wide and gray and calm. A few boats moved slowly across the surface. I took a deep breath. This was why I came here. To see things like this. To experience something beyond my quiet house in Ohio. I walked along the boardwalk. I stopped to read plaques about the history of the area. I took photos of the skyline. I sat on a bench and watched seagulls fight over scraps near a trash can. I felt almost normal again, almost like yesterday hadn't happened. I checked my phone. It was almost noon. I thought about finding lunch, maybe trying a restaurant I had bookmarked. I stood and started walking back toward the main streets. That's when I saw him again. The man in the gray jacket. He was standing near a lamppost about 50 feet away, not moving, just standing, watching me. My stomach dropped. My vision tunneled. It wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. Not again. Not in a completely different part of the city. He wasn't a tourist taking the same route. He was following me, on purpose. I turned and walked in the opposite direction. Fast. Not running, but close. My breathing came in short gasps. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew he was there. I could feel it. I walked for 2 blocks. Then I stopped at a crosswalk and risked a glance over my shoulder. He was there. Same distance, same pace. My hands started shaking again. I crossed the street when the light changed. So did he. I thought about going into a store. But what if he followed me inside? What if he cornered me in an aisle where no one could see? I thought about yelling, screaming, making a scene. But what if people thought I was crazy? What if they didn't believe me? What if he ran and I was left standing there looking like a paranoid fool? I kept walking. I turned down a busier street. More people, more witnesses. I felt slightly safer. I ducked into a small grocery store. I grabbed a basket and pretended to shop. I walked up and down the aisles, picking up items, putting them back, watching the door. He didn't come in. I stayed for 20 minutes. Then I paid for a bottle of water I didn't need and left. He was across the street, leaning against a building, looking at his phone. But I knew he was watching. I started walking again. Faster now. My legs burned. My feet hurt. I didn't care. I just needed to get away. I turned down a side street, then another. I zigzagged through the neighborhood trying to lose him, but every time I looked back, he was there. Not close. Never close enough to make it obvious. But there. Always there. I felt tears prick my eyes. I blinked them away. I couldn't cry. Not here. Not now. I needed to think. I needed a plan. I saw a church up ahead. The doors were open. I walked inside. It was dim and cool and quiet. A few people sat in the pews, heads bowed. A woman lit candles near the altar. I sat in the back row and tried to steady my breathing. I pulled out my phone. I thought about calling the police. But what would I tell them? A man is walking near me? They would laugh. They would tell me to stop wasting their time. I didn't have evidence. I didn't have a crime. I just had fear, and fear wasn't enough. I stayed in the church for an hour. I prayed even though I'm not religious. I just needed something to hold on to, something to make me feel less alone. When I finally left, I checked the street in both directions. I didn't see him. Relief flooded through me. Maybe he gave up. Maybe he got bored. Maybe I really had been imagining things. I started walking back toward the hotel. I took a route I hadn't used before. Wider streets, more people. I felt safer. I was almost back when I turned a corner and nearly walked straight into him. He was standing right there, 5 feet away, close enough that I could see his face clearly for the first time. He was maybe 45, thin, stubble on his jaw, dark eyes. He looked normal, ordinary. The kind of man you wouldn't notice in a crowd. But he was looking right at me, and he wasn't moving. We stood there for a few seconds. My heart hammered, my throat closed. Then he stepped aside. Just slightly. Just enough to let me pass. I walked past him. My whole body shook. I didn't run. I forced myself to walk normally, to not show how terrified I was. I made it to the hotel. I pushed through the door. I climbed the stairs. I locked myself in my room. And then I cried. I didn't leave my room for the rest of that day. I sat on the bed with my back against the headboard and my phone in my hand. I thought about calling Emma. I thought about calling Michael. I thought about calling the front desk and asking them to call the police. But I didn't do any of those things. Because what would I say? A man stood near me on the street? A man looked at me? It sounded insane, even in my own head. I had no proof, no photos, no witnesses, just my word against nothing, against a feeling, against fear that lived only in my chest and refused to let go. I ordered room service again. Soup this time. I barely touched it. I tried to watch TV but couldn't focus. Every show felt too loud, too bright, too disconnected from what was happening to me. I turned it off and sat in silence. I listened to sounds from other rooms, voices through the walls, footsteps in the hallway, a door slamming somewhere above me. Each sound made me jump. I kept checking the door, the lock, the chain, the peephole. Everything was secure, but I didn't feel secure. I felt trapped, like I had flown thousands of miles just to lock myself in a box and wait for something terrible to happen. Night came slowly. I watched the light fade through the gap in the curtains. I thought about tomorrow, about whether I should leave, book a flight home, admit defeat, tell my kids I couldn't handle it, tell myself I had tried, and that was enough. But the thought made me angry. I had spent my whole life being afraid to leave my marriage earlier, afraid to ask for what I wanted, afraid to take up space. And now I was here, finally doing something for myself, and some random man was taking that away from me. It wasn't fair. None of this was fair. But fair didn't matter. Safety mattered. And I didn't feel safe. I slept badly again. I woke up every hour, every time I heard a noise, every time my brain invented a threat that wasn't there. By the time morning light crept through the curtains, I felt exhausted, hollowed out. I got up and showered. I looked at myself in the mirror again. I looked worse than yesterday. Dark circles under my eyes, skin pale and drawn. I looked like someone who was falling apart. I got dressed. I sat on the bed. I stared at my suitcase in the corner. I could pack it right now. I could be at the airport in an hour. I could be home by tonight. Safe, alone, but still safe. I didn't pack. Instead, I forced myself to make a plan. I would leave the hotel. I would go somewhere public, somewhere crowded, a museum, a tourist attraction, somewhere with security guards and metal detectors and people everywhere, somewhere he couldn't follow without being seen. I would stay there all day if I had to. And if I saw him again, I would go straight to security. I would tell them everything. I would make them listen. I grabbed my purse and left the room before I could change my mind. The lobby was empty except for the desk clerk, a different one this time, a woman in her 30s with short dark hair. She smiled at me. I almost asked her if she had seen a man in a gray jacket hanging around outside. But I didn't. I just nodded and walked out. The morning was cold. The sky was clear for the first time since I arrived. I walked quickly. I kept my head down. I didn't look around. I didn't want to see him. I didn't want to know if he was already there, already watching, already following. I just walked. I went to the Notre Dame Basilica. I had read about it before the trip. A famous church in old Montreal. Beautiful inside. Lots of tourists, lots of people. I paid the entrance fee and walked in. The interior was massive. High ceilings, stained glass, rows of wooden pews. It was stunning. Under different circumstances, I would have been amazed, but I barely saw it. I was too busy scanning faces, looking for gray jackets, looking for him. I didn't see him. I walked slowly through the church. I sat in a pew near the middle. I pretended to admire the architecture, but really, I was just watching the door. I stayed for 2 hours. Tourists came and went, families, couples, groups with tour guides speaking different languages. No one paid attention to me. No one seemed threatening. I started to relax a little. Maybe he wasn't here. Maybe he didn't know where I was. Maybe I had finally lost him. I stood and walked toward the exit. I stepped outside into the bright sunlight. I squinted, and then I saw him, standing across the square, same jacket, same cap, looking directly at me. My knees almost gave out. I grabbed the wall to steady myself. He didn't move. He just stood there, waiting. I turned and walked in the opposite direction. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might pass out. I walked fast, too fast. People stared. I didn't care. I turned down a narrow street, then another. I was practically running now. I looked back. He was following, still the same distance, still calm, still patient. Like this was a game. Like he had all the time in the world and knew I would eventually run out of places to go. I saw a police officer standing on a corner, a young man in a dark uniform. I walked straight to him. My voice shook when I spoke. I told him a man was following me, that I had seen him multiple times, that I was scared. The officer looked concerned. He asked where the man was. I turned to point, but the street was empty. The man in the gray jacket was gone. I looked around frantically. Nothing. The officer asked me to describe him. I did. Gray jacket, jeans, dark cap, average height. The officer wrote it down. He asked if the man had threatened me, if he had said anything, if he had touched me. I said no. He asked if I had seen him do anything illegal. I said no. He told me to be careful, to stay in public places, to call if I saw the man again. Then he walked away. I stood there feeling stupid, feeling helpless. The officer didn't believe me. I could see it in his eyes. He thought I was a paranoid tourist, a woman overreacting to nothing. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe the stress of traveling alone had broken something in my brain, and now I was seeing threats everywhere. But I didn't believe that. I knew what I saw. I knew what I felt. This was real. He was real, and he wasn't going to stop. I walked back to the hotel. I didn't take my time. I didn't stop to look at anything. I just walked, fast and direct. I kept checking behind me. I didn't see him. But that didn't mean he wasn't there. That didn't mean he wasn't watching from somewhere I couldn't see. I reached the hotel and went inside. The same woman was at the desk. I asked her if anyone had been asking about me. She looked confused. She said no. I asked if she had seen a man in a gray jacket hanging around outside. She said she hadn't noticed anyone. I thanked her and went upstairs. I locked myself in my room again. I sat on the bed. I pulled out my phone. I opened the browser and searched for information about stalking, about what to do if you're being followed. The articles all said the same things. Document everything. Tell people where you are. Don't go anywhere alone. Call the police. But I had done those things, and none of it helped. Because he was careful. He never got too close. Never did anything obviously wrong. He was just there. Always there. And that wasn't enough for anyone to do anything about. I thought about my ex-husband again. About how he used to dismiss my feelings. Tell me I was being dramatic. Tell me I worried too much. I wondered if that's what people would say about this. That I was being dramatic. That I was worrying too much. But this wasn't in my head. This was happening. A man was following me. A man I didn't know. A man who smiled at me like he knew something I didn't. And I had no idea why. I had no idea what he wanted. And that was the worst part. Not knowing. Not understanding. Just waiting for something terrible to happen and having no power to stop it. I stayed in my room until dark. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I just sat there, thinking, planning, trying to figure out what to do next. I could leave. I could go home. But what if he followed me to the airport? What if he got on the same plane? What if this didn't end just because I left Montreal? What if he knew where I lived? I realized I was spiraling. I was imagining worst-case scenarios that probably weren't real, but probably wasn't good enough. Probably didn't make me feel safe. I needed certainty. I needed answers. I needed this to stop. I decided to leave the hotel, not to go home, just to move, to stay somewhere else, somewhere he wouldn't expect. I packed my suitcase. I checked the time. Almost 8. I waited until 9. Then I called the front desk. I told them I needed to check out. The woman sounded surprised. She asked if everything was okay. I said yes. Just a change of plans. She said she would prepare my bill. I hung up. I grabbed my suitcase. I opened the door and looked down the hallway. Empty. I walked to the stairs. I went down slowly, quietly. I reached the lobby. The woman handed me my bill. I paid with my credit card. She asked if I needed a taxi. I said yes. She called one for me. I waited by the door. I watched the street through the glass. I didn't see him. The taxi pulled up. I walked outside and got in quickly. I told the driver to take me to a different hotel, one on the other side of the city. He nodded and started driving. I watched out the back window. No one followed, no gray jacket, no familiar face. Just empty streets and streetlights. I started to breathe easier. Maybe this would work. Maybe I could disappear. Maybe he would go back to my old hotel tomorrow and find me gone and give up. Maybe this was over. The new hotel was larger, modern, glass doors and a bright lobby. I checked in under a different name. I paid cash. I took my key and went to my room on the 4th floor. It was nicer than the last one. Bigger bed, newer furniture, a view of the city lights. I locked the door. I put my suitcase down. I sat on the bed. I felt exhausted, wrung out, but also slightly hopeful. Maybe I had finally outsmarted him. Maybe I was safe now. I lay down without changing my clothes. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in 2 days, I felt like I might actually sleep. Then my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I opened it. My blood went cold. It was a photo. Of me. Walking into this hotel, taken from across the street, taken less than 20 minutes ago. And below the photo, just 2 words. Sleep well. I dropped the phone. It hit the carpet with a soft thud. My whole body went numb. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Just stared at the screen lying face up on the floor, the photo still glowing. Me. Walking through those glass doors. 20 minutes ago. He had been there. He had watched me check in. He knew where I was. He had my phone number. How did he have my phone number? I hadn't given it to anyone. I hadn't posted about this trip on social media. I hadn't told anyone except my kids where I was going. This wasn't random. This wasn't some opportunistic creep who spotted a lone woman and decided to follow her. This was planned, targeted. He knew things about me, and I knew nothing about him. I grabbed the phone off the floor. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped it again. I called the front desk. A man answered. I told him I needed security, now. He asked what was wrong. I said someone was outside the hotel, someone dangerous. He said he would send someone up. I hung up. I paced the room, back and forth, back and forth. I looked at the window, 4th floor, too high to jump. I pulled the curtains closed anyway. I checked the door, locked, chain on, deadbolt engaged. But none of it mattered. He knew where I was. He could be in the lobby right now. He could be in the hallway. He could be anywhere. Someone knocked on the door. I jumped. A voice called out, "Security." I looked through the peephole. A man in a dark uniform, older, graying hair. I opened the door but kept the chain on. He asked what the problem was. I showed him the text, the photo. I told him everything. The 3 days of following, the different locations, the police officer who didn't help. The man's face grew serious. He said he would check the cameras, see if anyone matching that description was in the building. He told me to stay in my room, keep the door locked. He would be back. I waited. Minutes felt like hours. I sat on the edge of the bed. I stared at the door. I listened to every sound. Footsteps in the hallway, voices somewhere distant, the hum of the elevator. My mind raced. What if the security guard didn't find anything? What if the man wasn't in the building? What if he was just outside, waiting? What if he had already left and I was panicking over nothing? But it wasn't nothing. The text was real. The photo was real. He was real. And he wanted me to know he was watching. The security guard came back 30 minutes later. He knocked. I opened the door. He said he checked the footage. He saw a man matching the description enter the lobby about 10 minutes after I did. Gray jacket. Cap pulled low. The man looked around. Then he left. He didn't approach the desk. Didn't go to the elevators. Just walked in, looked around, and walked out. The guard said he would alert the overnight staff, tell them to watch for anyone suspicious. He gave me his direct number, told me to call if I saw or heard anything. Then he left. I locked the door again. I sat on the bed. I pulled my knees to my chest. I tried to think rationally. He knew where I was, but he couldn't get to me. I was on the 4th floor. The door was locked. Security was watching. I was safe. For now. But what about tomorrow? What about when I had to leave this room? What about when I had to walk through that lobby, step outside, exist in the world where he could see me? I couldn't stay locked in here forever, but I couldn't leave either. I was trapped, completely and utterly trapped. I thought about calling my kids, but it was after midnight. They would be asleep. And what would I tell them? That I was being stalked? That I needed help? They would panic. They would tell me to come home immediately. They would say I should never have gone alone. They would be right. I should never have done this. I should have stayed in my quiet house in Ohio. I should have accepted that some things aren't meant for women my age, that some risks aren't worth taking, that safety matters more than adventure. I felt like a fool. A stupid, naive fool who thought she could be brave. I didn't sleep. I sat on the bed with the lights on and watched the door. I checked my phone every few minutes. No new messages. Just that one photo. That one text. Sleep well. Like this was a joke to him. Like my terror was entertaining. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. I wanted to feel anything other than this crushing, suffocating fear. But I just sat there, silent, frozen, waiting for morning. Dawn came slowly. Gray light filtered through the curtains. I stood and looked outside. The street below was empty, a few cars, no people. I showered, got dressed, packed my suitcase again. I wasn't staying here. I wasn't staying anywhere in Montreal. I was leaving, going to the airport, getting on the first flight back to the States. I didn't care if it made me a coward. I didn't care if I was giving up. I just wanted to go home. I wanted to be somewhere familiar, somewhere safe, somewhere he couldn't find me. I called the front desk. I said I was checking out. The woman asked if I wanted to settle my bill now or at the desk. I said at the desk. I grabbed my suitcase and left the room. The hallway was empty. I took the elevator down. The lobby was quiet. Just the woman at the desk and a man sitting in a chair near the window reading a newspaper. I walked to the desk. The woman smiled, asked if I enjoyed my stay. I said yes. She printed my bill. I paid. She asked if I needed a taxi. I said yes. To the airport. She called one. She said it would be here in 5 minutes. I thanked her. I stood near the door with my suitcase. I watched the street. The man with the newspaper stood up. He walked toward the door. Toward me. I stepped aside. He passed me. Pushed through the door, walked outside. He was wearing a gray jacket. My heart stopped. I looked at his face. It wasn't him. Different build. Different age. Just a man in a gray jacket. I exhaled. I was seeing him everywhere now. Every man. Every stranger. My mind was breaking. I needed to get out of here. The taxi pulled up. I walked outside. The morning air was cold. I put my suitcase in the trunk. I got in the back seat. I told the driver the airport. He nodded. Started driving. I watched out the back window. No one followed. The streets were still mostly empty. Just early morning traffic. A few pedestrians. I started to relax. Just a little. I was leaving. I was almost safe. Just get to the airport, get through security, get on a plane. Then this would be over. We drove for 10 minutes. The city passed by outside. Buildings, streets, people starting their day. Normal life continuing while mine fell apart. The driver turned onto a highway. The airport was 20 minutes away. I checked my phone. I looked up flights. There was one leaving in 2 hours. Direct to Cleveland. I could make it. I could be home by afternoon. I could lock my doors, call my kids, tell them I was okay. Lie and say the trip was fine, but I just missed home. They would believe me. They wouldn't ask questions, and I would never tell them the truth. Never admit how badly I had failed. The taxi slowed. Traffic ahead. The driver muttered something in French. We came to a stop. I looked out the window. Cars everywhere. Brake lights. No movement. The driver said there was an accident. It might take a while. I felt my chest tighten. I needed to get to the airport. I needed to get out of this city. I couldn't sit here. Couldn't wait. The driver turned on the radio. News in French. I didn't understand it. I just stared out the window, willing the traffic to move. My phone buzzed. Another text. Same unknown number. I didn't want to look, but I had to. I opened it. Another photo. Of me. In the taxi. Taken from a car nearby. The angle made it clear. He was in traffic with us. Right now. Close enough to take a photo. And below it. Where are you going? I looked around frantically. Cars on all sides. I couldn't see into most of them. Tinted windows. Reflections. I looked at the driver. He was focused on the traffic. Oblivious. I wanted to tell him. But what would I say? Someone is following us? He would think I was crazy. Just like the police officer. Just like everyone else. I was alone. Completely alone. And he knew it. Traffic started moving. Slowly. The driver merged into a different lane. I watched the cars around us. A sedan to the left. An SUV behind us. A truck to the right. Any of them could be him. All of them could be him. I felt like I was suffocating. The taxi felt too small. Too exposed. I wanted out. But there was nowhere to go. We were on a highway. Trapped in traffic. I pulled out my phone. I called the security guard from the hotel. He answered. I told him what was happening. He said to stay calm. To tell the driver to go straight to the airport. To stay in public areas. To find airport security immediately. He said he would call the police. Give them my information. Tell them to meet me at the airport. I thanked him. Hung up. I leaned forward. I told the driver I needed him to go straight to the departures area. No stops. He looked at me in the rearview mirror. Said okay. Asked if I was all right. I said yes. Just in a hurry. He nodded. Turned back to the road. Traffic opened up. He accelerated. I watched behind us. A black sedan changed lanes. Followed us. My breathing quickened. I told the driver to change lanes. He did. The sedan stayed behind us. I told him to change again. He looked confused but did it. The sedan changed too. I felt tears burning my eyes. He was right there, right behind us, following, watching, waiting. The airport exit appeared. The driver took it. The sedan took it too. We pulled up to the departures terminal. I threw cash at the driver. Too much. I didn't care. I grabbed my suitcase from the trunk and ran inside. I didn't look back. I just ran. Into the terminal. Past people, past luggage carts. I found a security checkpoint. I got in line. My hands shook. My vision blurred. I looked around, scanning faces, looking for him. I didn't see him, but that didn't mean he wasn't there. I reached the front of the line. I showed my passport, my ticket. The agent waved me through. I put my bag on the belt, walked through the metal detector. It beeped. I had forgotten to take off my watch. The agent asked me to step aside. Remove it. Try again. I did. My hands fumbled. The watch fell. I picked it up, tried again. Clear this time. I grabbed my bag, kept moving. I found my gate. I sat down, surrounded by people, travelers, families. I felt safer here, behind security, in a crowd. He couldn't get through without a ticket, without ID. I was safe. Finally safe. I checked my phone. No new messages. I looked around. No gray jacket, no familiar face, just strangers. Normal people going normal places. I closed my eyes, took a breath. It was over. I had escaped. I was going home. I heard the announcement. My flight was boarding. I stood, got in line, showed my ticket, walked down the jetway, found my seat, sat down, put my bag under the seat in front of me, fastened my seatbelt. The plane filled up. I watched each person who walked past. No one looked threatening. No one looked at me twice. The doors closed. The plane pushed back from the gate. I felt my body relax for the first time in days. We taxied to the runway. I looked out the window. Montreal disappearing behind us. I would never come back here. Never travel alone again. Never put myself in danger like this. The plane lifted off. I closed my eyes. And then I felt it. A tap on my shoulder. I turned. The man in the seat behind me leaned forward. Gray jacket, dark cap, that same terrible smile. He whispered 2 words. Nice try. I screamed. The sound ripped out of me before I could stop it. High and sharp and full of terror. Everyone turned. Passengers, flight attendants, all of them staring at me. The man pulled back, put his hands up, his face confused, concerned, like he had no idea why I was reacting this way. A flight attendant rushed over, asked what was wrong. I pointed at him. I said he was following me, that he had been stalking me for 3 days, that he sent me threatening texts. She looked at him. He shook his head. Said he didn't know what I was talking about. Said he just asked if I had a pen. Other passengers murmured. I heard whispers, saw them looking at me like I was insane. The flight attendant asked me to calm down, asked if I was sure. I pulled out my phone, showed her the texts, the photos. She looked at them, then looked at the man. Asked if this was him? I said yes. She asked him for his ID. He pulled out his wallet, handed her his driver's license. She looked at it, looked at him. They didn't match. Different name, different age. The man in the gray jacket wasn't the man from the photos. He just looked similar. Similar build, similar clothing. But not him. Not the same person. I felt the world tilt. My vision blurred. The flight attendant asked if I was okay, if I needed medical attention. I said no. I said I was sorry. I had made a mistake. The man said it was fine. But his eyes said something else, said I was crazy, dangerous. The flight attendant asked if I wanted to move seats. I said yes. She walked me to the front of the plane, sat me in an empty row, told me to breathe, brought me water. I drank it. My hands still shook. I couldn't stop them. The plane took off. I sat there staring at nothing. I had lost my mind. I had screamed at an innocent man, accused him of something he didn't do. Everyone on this plane thought I was unstable. And maybe I was. Maybe the stress had broken something in my brain. Maybe I was seeing connections that didn't exist. Maybe the man in Montreal had just been coincidence. Maybe all of this was in my head, but the texts were real. The photos were real. Someone had sent them. Someone had followed me. Even if it wasn't the man on this plane. Even if I couldn't trust my own eyes anymore. The flight was short, under 2 hours. I didn't move, didn't go to the bathroom, didn't look at anyone. I just sat there, waiting for it to be over. When we landed in Cleveland, I waited until everyone else got off. Then I stood, grabbed my bag, walked slowly down the aisle. The man in the gray jacket was gone. The other passengers were gone. Just me and the flight attendants cleaning up. One of them smiled at me, asked if I was feeling better. I said yes, lied. I walked off the plane. I went through the airport like a ghost. I got my checked bag. I took a shuttle to long-term parking. I found my car. I sat in the driver's seat and stared at the steering wheel. I was home. I was safe. It was over. But it didn't feel over. It felt like something had been taken from me. Something I would never get back. I started the car. I drove home. The familiar streets. The familiar houses. Everything exactly as I left it. But I wasn't the same. I would never be the same. I pulled into my driveway. I sat there for a long time before getting out. I grabbed my suitcase, walked to the front door, unlocked it, stepped inside. The house smelled stale, like nobody had been there for days, because nobody had. I locked the door behind me. All 3 locks. I checked the windows. All locked. I went upstairs, checked those windows too. Everything secure. But I didn't feel secure. I felt exposed, vulnerable, like he could find me even here. I unpacked, put my clothes in the laundry, threw away the Montreal guidebook I had brought. I never wanted to see it again, never wanted to think about that city. I took a shower, hot water. I stood under it until it ran cold. I got dressed in clean clothes. I went downstairs, made tea, sat at my kitchen table, stared at my phone. I needed to call my kids, tell them I was home, but I didn't want to talk to them, didn't want to hear their voices, didn't want to lie about how the trip went. My phone rang. Emma. I almost didn't answer, but I knew she would worry if I didn't. I picked up. She asked how Montreal was. I said it was fine. Beautiful city. Had a good time. She said I sounded tired. I said it was just jet lag. She said she was proud of me for going, for being brave. I wanted to tell her I wasn't brave, that I had run away, that I had failed. But I didn't. I just said thank you. We talked for a few more minutes. Then she had to go. I hung up, set the phone down, stared at it. I checked the unknown number. The texts were still there, the photos. I thought about deleting them, but I didn't. I needed proof. Proof that it had been real, that I wasn't crazy. I opened my laptop. I searched for information about stalking, about cyber stalking, about how someone could get your phone number. The answers were disturbing. Data breaches, public records, social media. There were dozens of ways. I thought about my Facebook profile. I had posted about retiring, about my kids moving away. I hadn't posted about Montreal. But maybe I had mentioned it somewhere, in a comment, in a conversation. Maybe someone had been watching me for longer than I thought. I spent the next few days barely leaving my house. I ordered groceries online, had them delivered. I kept my curtains closed. I checked my locks multiple times a day. I jumped at every sound, every car that drove past, every knock on the door. I stopped sleeping well. I would lie awake listening, waiting. For what, I didn't know. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over, that he was still out there, that he knew where I lived. A week passed, then 2. Nothing happened. No texts, no photos, no signs of anyone watching. I started to relax a little. Started to think maybe it really was over. Maybe he had gotten whatever sick thrill he wanted from scaring me. Maybe Montreal was as far as it went. I started going outside again. Short trips. To the grocery store, to the bank. Always during the day. Always to crowded places. I was careful, watchful. But nothing happened. Emma called again, asked if I wanted to come visit her in Boston, spend a weekend, see her new apartment. I said maybe. She said she was worried about me, that I sounded different, distant. I told her I was fine, just adjusting to retirement, to the empty house. She didn't push, but I could hear the concern in her voice. Michael called too, said the same things, asked the same questions. I gave the same answers. I was fine. Everything was fine. They believed me because they wanted to, because it was easier than the truth. A month after Montreal, I finally slept through the night. I woke up feeling almost normal. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, looked out the window at my backyard. The leaves were changing colors. Fall was here. The world kept turning. Life kept moving. And I was still here, still alive, still standing. I thought about the woman I had been before Montreal, the one who wanted adventure, who wanted to prove she was brave. That woman felt like a stranger now, someone naive and foolish. But maybe that was okay. Maybe some lessons are learned the hard way. I never told anyone what really happened. Not my kids, not my friends, not anyone. I kept it locked inside. A secret, a scar, something that changed me in ways no one else could see. I stopped planning trips, stopped thinking about traveling. I was done with that, done with being brave. I had tried, I had failed, and that was enough. I would live the rest of my life in this house, in this town, where things were familiar, where I knew the streets, where I felt safe. It wasn't the life I had imagined, but it was the life I had, and I was grateful for it. The texts stayed on my phone. I never deleted them. Sometimes late at night when I couldn't sleep, I would look at them, at the photos, at the 2 words. Sleep well. Nice try. I would wonder who he was, what he wanted, why he chose me. I never got answers. I probably never would. But I learned something. I learned that the world is more dangerous than I thought. That being alone makes you vulnerable. That some men see women my age as easy targets, invisible, forgettable. Someone who won't fight back. But I had fought back. In my own way. I had survived. I had escaped. And that had to be enough. I still check my locks every night. I still look over my shoulder when I'm out. I still feel a spike of fear when I see a gray jacket. But I'm alive. I made it home. And maybe that's all that matters. Maybe surviving is its own kind of victory, not the one I wanted, not the one I imagined, but the one I got. And I would carry it with me for the rest of my life. A reminder, a warning, a story I would never tell but would never forget. The story of the trip that was supposed to make me brave, but instead taught me to be afraid, and how sometimes being afraid is what keeps you alive. I'm 70 now. 13 years have passed since Montreal. My hair is completely white now. My hands shake more than they used to. I still live in the same house in Shaker Heights. Emma has 2 kids. Michael got married last year. They visit when they can. They still don't know what happened on that trip. They think I went to Montreal, had a nice time, and came home. They think I stopped traveling because I realized I preferred staying home. And I let them think that. Because the truth would only hurt them, would only make them worry, would only prove that they were right to be concerned about me going alone. I never traveled again. Not once. Not even to visit my kids. They come to me instead. They bring the grandchildren. We have holidays here, birthdays here, everything here. In this house where I feel safe, where I control who comes in, where I check the locks and keep the curtains closed and know every sound. People probably think I'm paranoid, a shut-in, an old woman who's afraid of the world. And they're right. I am afraid, because I know what's out there. I know what can happen. I know that danger doesn't always look dangerous. Sometimes it looks ordinary, normal, like a man in a gray jacket who could be anyone. I think about him sometimes, the man who followed me. I wonder if he did it to other women, if I was the first or the 100th, if he's still out there somewhere doing the same thing to someone else. Someone who might not escape. Someone who might not make it home. I reported it when I got back, sent the photos and texts to the police, gave them everything I had. They said they would investigate. I never heard back. I don't know if they tried. I don't know if it mattered. All I know is that he's still out there. And I'm still here. And that's the reality I live with. The house feels different now than it did 13 years ago. Back then, it felt empty. A reminder of everything I had lost. My marriage, my kids growing up and leaving, my purpose disappearing. But now it feels like a fortress, a place of safety. The walls protect me. The locks keep danger out. And I don't mind the quiet anymore. The quiet means no one is following me. No footsteps matching mine. No photos being taken. No texts in the middle of the night. The quiet means I'm alone. And alone used to terrify me. But now I understand that alone is better than afraid. I sit in my kitchen most mornings. Same table, same chair. I drink my coffee and look out at the backyard. The trees I planted years ago are tall now. Birds come to the feeder I put up. Squirrels run across the fence. Everything is familiar, predictable, safe. And that's all I want anymore. Not adventure, not excitement, not proof that I'm brave or independent or capable. Just safety, just peace. Just the knowledge that when I go to sleep at night, I'll wake up in the morning in the same place. Undisturbed, unharmed, alive. My grandchildren ask why I don't travel, why I don't come visit them. Emma lives in Boston. Michael lives in Denver. They want me to see their homes, their lives. But I can't. I've tried to explain without explaining. Tried to say that traveling is hard at my age, that I'm comfortable here, that I prefer they come to me. They don't understand. They think I'm being stubborn, difficult, old, and maybe I am. But I'm also smart enough to know my limits, to know what I can handle. And getting on a plane, going to a strange city, being vulnerable again, I can't handle that. I won't handle that. Not ever again. The texts are still on my phone. I transferred them when I got new phones over the years, backed them up, saved them. I don't look at them anymore, but I keep them. Evidence. Proof. A reminder that it was real, that I didn't imagine it, that my fear wasn't irrational or exaggerated or foolish. It was justified, necessary. It saved my life. And whenever I doubt myself, whenever I think maybe I'm being too careful, too afraid, too controlled by what happened, I remember those words. Sleep well. Nice try. And I know I'm doing the right thing. I'm protecting myself. Because no one else will. People ask if I have regrets. If I wish I had stayed in Montreal longer. If I wish I had been braver. And the answer is no. I don't regret leaving. I don't regret running. I don't regret choosing survival over pride. Because I'm here. I'm alive. And that's more than some women can say. women who trusted the wrong person, women who ignored their instincts, women who thought being polite or reasonable or calm was more important than being safe. I wasn't polite. I wasn't reasonable. I panicked, and I ran, and I saved myself. And I would do it again, 1,000 times over. So this is my life now. This house, this routine, these walls. It's not the life I planned at 57 when I booked that ticket to Montreal, when I imagined myself as someone brave and independent and free. But it's the life I have, the life I chose, the life I earned by surviving. And some days that feels like enough. Some days it feels like victory. Not the glorious kind, not the kind anyone writes about, but the quiet kind. The kind that means you wake up every morning. The kind that means you're still here, still breathing, still safe. And in the end, maybe that's all that really matters. If you're watching this and you're thinking about traveling alone, especially if you're a woman, especially if you're older, please be careful. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't worry about being polite. Don't worry about overreacting. Don't worry about what other people think. Your safety is more important than anything else. More important than adventure. More important than proving something to yourself. More important than other people's opinions. Stay alert. Stay aware. And if you need to run, run. Don't hesitate. Don't second guess. Just go. Because getting home alive is all that matters. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, or if you've had a similar experience, please share it in the comments below. Your story might help someone else stay safe. Please subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and share this video with anyone who might need to hear it. Stay safe out there. And remember, being afraid isn't weakness. Sometimes, it's the smartest thing you can be.